Hey everyone, this is Nim Kolkar. Welcome. I'm just going to wait for a bit, and my apologies for starting a little bit late. No excuses, but I will make up for lost time, that's for sure. All right, so let's just wait for a bit while I fiddle around with a few things here. So we are doing the How to Write Non-Fiction Books mini workshop today, which will go on for an hour. So if you have any questions related to the topics that I will be exploring in the workshop, feel free to type those in the comment section below. Like I always say, I am unable to take questions or answer questions that are posted after the live session has ended. So do excuse me if I don't respond. It'll most likely be because the comments were posted after the live session had ended, and I'll do my very best to answer all the questions that are posted while the session is still live. So I'm super excited because I'm doing one of my favorite topics, which is writing non-fiction books. Now last Saturday I actually did a mini workshop on how to write fiction. So if there are any fiction lovers listening in today and you missed out listening to that particular workshop, it is still on my author page, so just scroll down. Because I post so much, you might have to scroll for a bit till you find it, but it is still there as a recorded version, and feel free to go and have a listen. So that's an hour-long workshop as well. All right, so people are still logging in. You know the drill. I like everyone ideally to just say hi Nim or hello Nim as you log in, just so that I know that you are all there and listening. Now hopefully the audio is clear and you can hear me all right. So I had done a little survey a few weeks ago asking people whether they wanted me to do a workshop on fiction, writing fiction, or on writing non-fiction, and I wasn't quite sure which way it was going to swing, but I made a very interesting discovery, which is that there were as many people who were asking for a fiction workshop, how to write fiction, as there were those who were asking how to write non-fiction. So that was interesting, which is why I decided to actually have two workshops. So don't forget to say hi as you log in, and we're going to dive right in a few moments. I wrote a post this morning, and many of you have already read it, about, you know, when I woke up this morning, as soon as I opened my eyes, the first thought that struck me was that I have to present this live workshop today, and it was so cold and the quilt was so warm that my motivation, my level of motivation on a scale of 1 to 10, with 1 being very little and 10 being a lot of motivation, my motivation was at 0 or sub-0. But like I always say, you know, motivation is rather overrated. I believe more in momentum, and I believe that it's all about, you know, taking the first step and then the second and the third. And taking the first step is always the most difficult. Step 2, 3, 4 become progressively just marginally easier. Now, in case you're wondering if I am feeling motivated at this given moment, yes, I am, because after that initial period of lazy thoughts first thing in the morning, I reminded myself of all the things I had to get done to prepare for this workshop. And like I said a few moments ago, it's about building momentum. So right now, I'm super motivated to be here with you all on this Saturday afternoon. Thank you so much for joining in. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Nim Kolkar. I'm the published author of 3 books, and currently writing my 4th. I also have a very busy blog called Nim's Niche, which I started in 2011, so it's been there for a long time. It's got heaps and heaps of articles, so if you haven't read them or you're not familiar, hop along to my website, which is www.nimkolkar.com, and you should see the blog up there in the tabs section. Alrighty, so yes, in addition to being an author, I am an international speaker as well as a life coach, so and of course a creative skills writing mentor as well. So those are the few things that I keep myself busy with. Let's get started today with how to write non-fiction. Now primarily I will be talking about writing non-fiction books. So those of you who've always been interested in writing a book in the non-fiction genre, hopefully you should learn some of the tricks of the trade in today's workshop. Now, to kick off today's session, I just wanted to show you the 3 books that I have written. Now, of course, you will see the mirror image because mine is a Samsung phone, so Facebook does not allow me to show it the right side around. But I'll quickly show you my non-fiction book. So that's Unlock the Real You. Some of you have already read it. Unlock the Real You. So that's strategies for getting ahead personally and professionally. And My Little Baby, which is A Little Wiser, A Little Happier, which was launched in December last year. So the tagline for this book is The Art of Balancing Everyday Life. And the fiction book that I talked about last week was Unraveling Anjali, Diary of an Immigrant Bride. So those of you who want to know how to write a fiction book, please hop along to my workshop that happened last Saturday. But for today, I'm going to focus on these 2 books and everything that I have learned from my journey writing these couple of non-fiction books. So I'm going to teach you some tools and techniques that will help you kickstart your non-fiction project. Now let's begin with some of the most common types of non-fiction books that most people choose to write. And if you don't quite know at this point what kind of non-fiction book you'd like to write someday, then these suggestions might help you get started. A lot of people I personally know have reached out to me and told me that they are interested in writing what is known as a memoir or an autobiography. They want to write their own life story, which is a great goal to have. So writing your memoir, autobiography, or your life story is one form of non-fiction book that you can write, particularly if you've had an exceptionally interesting life so far. So that's one. The second one is the self-help genre, which is what I specialize in. So both my non-fiction books that I just showed you on the screen fall in the self-help genre because I am primarily a life coach, and those are the topics that I coach on. So self-help. Then there's something called travel guides or blogs. So if you're someone who is a travel freak, who loves going to different countries and exploring different cultures and trying out a variety of cuisines, then perhaps writing a travel guide might be something that's right up your alley. Then you have what are known as the how-to guides or manuals. So for example, if you want to teach your audience how to do a certain thing or how to master a certain skill from start to finish, then you can consider writing a how-to guide. People love how-to guides, and there is a lot of demand for that. So if you are someone who is a master at what you do, then you can consider teaching others through your how-to guide. Then we come to cookbooks, which is again a very, very, very popular genre. And I think the bookshelves in bookshops are groaning under the weight of cookbooks. So if you are a bit of a master chef, then you can consider putting all your exclusive recipes into a cookbook, you know, a one-stop shop for those who are aspiring chefs themselves. So then there's cookbooks. And the last thing I want to talk about, which is a very, very important book that you can consider in the modern world of today, is what is known as the expert or the niche book. The expert book or the niche book. So if you are a bit of a subject matter expert, if you are a leading voice in your industry, if you're a bit of an influencer, a bit of a trendsetter, if you know more about your topic than most people, then you could consider writing a subject matter book, which is a niche book targeted at a niche audience, and it establishes you as a thought leader. So that's a very, very popular non-fiction book genre that a lot of entrepreneurs, business owners, subject matter experts are exploring today. It also serves as their business card. So let's say you have your own business and then you write and publish a book that talks about what you do. Then it can serve as your business card. So let's say you go to a networking event. You don't have to carry your business cards everywhere. Imagine how much more impressive it is when you're able to say, hey, don't worry about a business card. Here's a book I recently wrote and published. Have a read. It'll tell you a lot about myself, my team, and my company. I think that's such a powerful tool. Okay, so those are some of the most popular genres where non-fiction books are concerned. Of course, there are many, many more subcategories, but I didn't want to bore you all with those. There are many more, but for now, I just wanted to tell you some of the most common ones. Now, let me quickly say my hi's because I know a few people have very kindly followed my suggestion and request to say hi. Hi, Esther. How are you? Monica says hi. Nim, how are you? I'm well, Monica. Thanks for saying hi. Hope you're well too. Poonam, hello. So everyone, those of you who have logged in and who missed my request at the start, please say hi, Nim, whenever you get a moment, just so I know that you are part of this workshop and that you're joining us all here today, this Saturday afternoon. So I've just covered the most common types of non-fiction books that you can write. Now, I'm going to begin with some very, very basic tips when it comes to starting to write your non-fiction book. No matter which genre you pick in the non-fiction category, these tips are going to help you. The very first thing you need to know before you even put pen to paper or before you even start typing on your laptop is understand the why. WHY behind writing your non-fiction book. In the simplest of terms, what that means is you must know your central purpose, the core reason why you want to write and publish this non-fiction book. What is your goal? What is the aim? What is your intention? Do you want to make some money out of the book? Do you want a bit of fame? Do you want to establish yourself as a thought leader, a subject matter expert, or a bit of an influencer in your industry? Is that the reason you want to write and publish this nonfiction book? Is it because you want to convey a very important message to the world? Is it because you want to use this book as a marketing tool for your business enterprise? Is it simply because you feel you have a story to tell, that your life story might have experiences, incidents, and insights that might help someone else going through a similar challenge or an obstacle that you may have faced and overcome over the years? And you want to serve it as a beacon of hope to other people who are experiencing this. Whatever the case may be, it is super, super important to get that sense. Excuse me, I'm just gonna have a sip of water. I get so excited, as you all know. Very, very important for you to know exactly what your purpose is before you start writing a book. For example, Unlock the Real You. When I wrote this book, I had a singular intention behind writing this particular book. Every single chapter in this book, and they're all mini chapters, every single chapter is a mistake that I have made either in my professional life or in my personal life. And trust me, I have made many, many, many mistakes in my journey so far. So every chapter is a mistake I have made at some point, either in my personal relationships, friendships, or in my career, in my professional life. Now, the reason I wanted to write this book was because as a life coach and as a mentor, I coach professionals to get ahead in their careers, to become more visible in their workplace, to fulfill their dreams, right? So I share a lot of these learnings anyway with my clients. What I wanted to do through this book was to show that a mistake is something we should not ignore. We should leverage every mistake we make because there's so much to be learned from every mistake that we go through. So what I've done through this book is I've shared every mistake I've made in the form of individual chapters. I talk about what I learned from that mistake and how I am now using those learnings to lead everyday life so that I don't make the same mistakes again. So the purpose behind writing this book was to share with my current clients, with my future clients, with the world at large, that if you make a mistake, how you can actually learn from it and leverage it to your advantage. So I was very crystal clear in my mind about the why, the WHY behind writing this book. So that was Unlock the Real You. When I wrote A Little Wiser, A Little Happier, again, I was very clear in my mind about what I wanted to achieve through this book. I wanted to show that happiness is an ongoing process, and every day we become a tad wiser. And as we become a tad wiser, we become a whole lot happier. So again, the mini chapters in this book, and I have a sort of liking for mini chapters. You may have all realized I don't like any of the heavy duty stuff. So each of the chapters in this book is an aha moment that I have had in my life, in my travels, in my relationships, which taught me how to seek happiness from within without depending on other people or external factors to validate my own existence. So my purpose behind writing A Little Wiser, A Little Happier was to show how wisdom can lead to happiness, which is why it's a little wiser, a little happier, and not a little happier, a little wiser, because I think wisdom comes first, and with wisdom comes happiness. So that was my purpose. So let's say you're thinking of writing a nonfiction book. The first step is understand and write down in your notebook. Please do. And if you have a notebook here, just write that down. I need to know the why behind my book. So write down, maybe in 1 or 2 sentences max, the reason you're writing this non-fiction book. So that's the first and most important step. Does anyone have any questions so far? And where are all the highs? I've only had a handful of highs and hellos so far. Where's everyone else? So don't forget to drop a quick comment to let me know that you are listening. All right, so that's the first tip when it comes to writing a non-fiction book. The second tip is to understand your target audience. Who are you writing this book for? Now, I'm sure that many of you might be tempted to think, oh, I should just write for the general audience. I should write for the world at large, because the more the merrier. The more people who read my books, the more exposure I will get. Hence, my book is aimed at anyone and everyone. Please don't make that mistake. It is a trap you should not fall into. No author, whether it's a fiction writer or a non-fiction writer, should write just for general public, because when you try to please everyone, you end up pleasing no one. Remember that famous quote that when you try to please everyone, you end up pleasing no one. So in your mind, look, it's great to hope that the entire world reads your book. That would be fabulous for any writer, right? I mean, I'd be thrilled if every person in the universe reads my book. But when I was writing each of my books, I knew in my mind which is the main audience that I am targeting, which is the main group of people that I'm writing this for. Everything else, whoever else reads it, is a bonus. So you must know in your mind, who are you writing this book for? So when I was writing Unlock the Real You, in my mind, I was very clear that I'm writing this for professionals who are sort of maybe 5 to 10 years into their professional journey or longer, and they've had some time to make some professional mistakes, etc., and then they could fully identify with each of the chapters that I am writing, because they may have made a similar mistake themselves, or they may know someone who's made a similar mistake, and how they can actually use those life lessons to improve their career. So that was my target audience for Unlock the Real You. When I wrote A Little Wiser, A Little Happier, I was primarily writing for people who are 35 and above, because they've lived a bit of life, they've had relationships, they've had a chance to experience the ups and downs that life has to offer, which is why perhaps they're at a point in life where they're ready to become just a little bit wiser, so that they can increase the happiness quotient in their everyday lives. So that was my audience for A Little Wiser, A Little Happier. So step 2 in your notebook, if you're taking down the notes, is to write down, who is my audience? Who am I targeting? What is the age group? Whatever details you can come up with where your client avatar is concerned, go for it. The more details you put down as you are brainstorming ideas for the book, the better. Manisha says, hi Nim, how are you? Manisha, I'm very well, thank you. I hope you're well too. Thank you for joining in. All right, so that was the second point. The third thing to remember is to switch off your internal editor, switch off your internal critic as you are writing your non-fiction book. Now, this is important whether you're writing a fiction book, whether you're writing a blog post, whether you're writing an article, and of course when you're writing a non-fiction book. Switch off the internal critic and the internal editor. What do I mean by that? Well, a lot of people strive for perfectionism right from word go. They're hoping that they're writing this book, and then every sentence they write, they will read it, they will be unhappy with the quality of the sentence, they will think it is nothing too great, it doesn't sound engaging or appealing, and then they will hit the delete button or they will cross it out with their pen. Please don't do that. It is pretty presumptuous on our parts to expect that the very first words we write will be so good that they're ready to go to the printing press. It doesn't happen like that. Even the most established of authors will go through several drafts of their book before they're happy with the quality of the words that are staring back at them from the laptop screen. So be kind to yourself. Switch off the internal editor. Just write from the heart whatever comes to mind, and then later when you have some more time on hand, of course you can revisit the pages and keep editing as you go, keep improving the quality as you go. Okay, all right, so switching off the internal editor and not worrying about whether every sentence sounds perfect or not. First of all, I'm not a big believer of being perfect, because I think that is a surefire road to misery. Now, when I look back at each of the books that I have published, years later, as I read, occasionally sort of flick through the pages and have a read, of course, there are moments where I think I could have written that sentence better, or I could have shaped that chapter better. There is always room for improvement, right? But if I had waited back then to make each book perfect, super perfect, 100%, before 100% that I was happy with it, before I let it out into the world, then I would still be a no book wonder, right? I wouldn't have published a single book. So when you look back, as you evolve as writers, of course you're going to write better stuff over the years, but you must know when something is good enough. You've done the best you can. One thing, of course, I insist that people should pay a lot of attention to and set high standards for is editing. I detest books that get sent out to print with grammatical errors or with typos. I think that just shows a lot of carelessness on the part of the author. Now, you might think, oh, well, that's the editor's job. Yes, it is. And look, I've had some amazing editors and I have amazing relationships with all my editors. But I do believe that the responsibility largely lies with the author as well. Even after all my editors had edited my books and said that it was okay to go to print, I still made sure that I went through each of my manuscripts from start to finish one more time, just to make sure, because we're all only human, just to make sure that there was no typo or there was no grammatical mistake that had missed our eyes. So that's the one thing that I will ask all authors aspiring and established to pay special attention to, because it is unfair to the reader when you publish a book that hasn't been checked for some of the simplest mistakes, grammatical or spelling wise. It's unfair to the reader. And I think we owe it to our readers to give high quality stuff. So that's the next tip that I wanted to. Now here, I'm going to ask a few questions for this next point. And I have covered this particular point in my creative writing Facebook Live for Kids that I had done a few months ago, which is active versus passive voice. Active voice versus passive voice. Now, for those of you who are not very fond of grammar and who have forgotten all the grammar lessons you did in school, this is going to be a crash course, isn't it? So, who can give me an example of an active voice sentence or a passive voice sentence? Does anyone want to quickly write in the comments? Maybe I'll make life a little easier for you. Let me ask you a question. Let's say the sentence is, she bought a book. Or let's say Joan bought a book. That's an active voice sentence. Joan bought a book. How would you convert it into passive voice? What would the passive voice version of Joan bought a book be? Joan bought a book. This is active voice. Can someone please in the comments, let's see how much you remember of school grammar. How would you convert that into passive voice? Joan bought a book is a sentence I'm telling you, which is an active voice. Now I need you to convert it to passive voice. Come on, I'm sure some of you would know. Okay. Hopefully some of you are typing, but in the interest of time, let me tell you. A book was bought by Joan. That is passive voice. So active voice is Joan bought the book, and the passive voice is a book was bought by Joan. Now, do you see how suddenly the sentence has become clunkier? It has become longer. It has become just a little bit more tedious to read. Okay, let's say Jack ate a sandwich. Jack ate a sandwich is active voice. If you were to convert that to passive, a sandwich was eaten by Jack. So much longer, so much more tedious. Now, when you use passive voice sentences for the large part in any written piece, what it does is it makes it overwhelming for the reader. It distances the reader from the action that is happening on the page. Your narrative or your piece or your writing becomes boring. Now, does that mean you should never use passive voice in your writing? Well, I don't believe in never, so never say never. Of course, there is a place for passive voice, but that is more from a stylistic perspective where you've chosen to write passive voice sentences just to create a bit of, just to slow down the pace a little. Because active voice picks up the pace of a narrative or of a writing piece, and passive voice does tend to slow it down. It makes it a bit more languid. I love that word, right? It makes it a bit more languid. It makes it slower. It distances the reader from the action. So if your entire non-fiction book, or fiction for that matter, whatever it is that you're writing, if it has a lot of passive voice sentences, you are going to put your reader to sleep. Either that, or they will close the book with a frustrated sigh and go away and try to find something lighter to read. Okay, so when you're writing your nonfiction, please look out for active voice versus passive voice. I've given you a very, very simplistic explanation of how it is structured, because I don't want to turn this into a grammar lesson. It is personally for me as well a topic that I don't particularly enjoy, but it is a very important part of language. So it's important for you to understand, because many times it's the obvious stuff that authors go for and they forget things like active voice and passive voice, and then they wonder why people don't read their work the way they had hoped they would. Okay, so that is passive voice. The other thing I find interesting is a lot of people use a lot of fancy words in close succession in a bid to show how well they know the language. But let me tell you something today. If you use a lot of fancy long words that people have to scramble and find a dictionary to understand the meaning of, you're going to lose your audience. If they don't understand what you're saying, and if they need to look at a dictionary to understand, if they have to stop every time they come across this word to look at a dictionary just so they understand the context of what you are saying, you're going to lose them, because it's very, very tiring to constantly Google the meaning of a word. So no matter how rich your vocabulary is, and no matter how tempted you are to use words that have 25 letters or more in each word, no matter how tempted you are, please avoid that trap, because it does not serve your purpose. And your purpose is, of course, to keep your reader reading from page 1 to the last page. Okay, so you may have an extensive vocabulary, and by all means show off that vocabulary every now and then, but the trick is to remember every now and then. Just the other day, I can't remember if it was on social media or if it was an email I received, but it was these cluster of words, and every third word, every second word was a word that either I had never heard in my life, or it was a word that I hadn't heard for many, many years. And some of them I knew the meaning, some of them I sort of had to work out based on the context, and some of them I literally had to Google. That was exhausting. I mean, that was emotionally and physically exhausting. No one wants to read a book like that. So wherever possible, if you can simplify the message for your reader, then it's important you do so. All right, what else did I have to say in terms of some general tips? Also, it's very important for you to know the topic that you're writing about really, really well. Of course, there is a lot to be said for research. So it's always a good idea when you're writing a non-fiction book to do a bit of research. But if you're writing on a topic that you don't know at all, then it's going to be a little bit tricky for you to convince your audience that you know what you're writing about, because there will be many, many loopholes in what you're writing. So always good, particularly if you're a beginner writer and it's your first non-fiction book that you're attempting, always a good idea to make life a little bit easier for yourself and write about something that you know really, really well. Now, like I said, in Unlock the Real You, it was mistakes that I had made in my personal and professional life. So who better to know my own mistakes than myself? So it was a topic that I knew really well. And similarly, A Little Wiser, A Little Happier was about my own experiences where I learned wisdom, where I had some aha moments through my interactions, through my conversations, through my experiences. So of course, it was first-hand knowledge that I knew really well. All my books have involved huge elements of research, of course. Any good writer must do their research, but all the books, even Diary of an Immigrant Bride, is the story of a young woman who's had an arranged marriage and then who's come to Australia and who goes through a lot of challenges that migrants go through. Now, because I personally have an arranged marriage, I personally was raised in Mumbai, India, and moved to Australia as a migrant 25 years ago. And then again went through all the ups and downs and challenges that a lot of migrants have to go through. It was first-hand knowledge, which made it easier for me to approach that storyline. Even though it is a fiction book, even though it is a piece of my imagination, I was writing about a young migrant woman, right? And because I have been through those experiences, it wasn't as difficult for me to relate to the challenges Anjali, my protagonist, was facing. So even with nonfiction, particularly if it is the first book you're writing, it's a good idea to write about something you know. And everyone's gone quiet, and I know you're all there watching. So is there any question you have for me so far? And everyone hasn't said hi yet, so I am wondering, why not? Poonam says hi, and Dipti says hi. Hi Poonam, hi Dipti, thank you for joining in. All right, so now we are going to come to how are we tracking for time. So we have about, let's say 20 minutes, and then maybe I'll leave 5 minutes for Q&A. So I'm going to talk about structuring a non-fiction book. How do you structure a non-fiction book? So let's say you have a general idea. Now you've got to build a structure. So we're going to talk about that in just a moment. I'm just going to sip my hot water, because when I get super excited and I talk a lot, then my throat does become a little tired. Hi Bhavik, how are you? So hopefully you're all enjoying the How to Write Nonfiction workshop. What I've just covered in the last 40 odd minutes is some general tips that will help you get started, things that I personally have learned in my own journey of having written 3 books so far and currently writing my 4th. So we now come to what is known as structuring a nonfiction book. Now, I'm not sure how many of you have heard of these terms, but there are 2 types of writers. There are the plotters and the pantsers. Okay, so that is spelled P-A-N-T-S-E-R-S. There are the plotters and then there are the pantsers. What does that mean? As the name signifies, a plotter is someone who has a well laid out structure, who plots and plans the book before writing even the first word. So there are the plotters, and then there are the pantsers. Now these are people who sort of just start writing and hope and trust that some form of structure will eventually develop and get them from the first page to the last page. Completely depends on your personality type. It completely depends on how you function. Long ago, I used to believe that I would probably be a pantser, someone who would just write and keep writing, and new characters would develop and my current characters would evolve, etc. I had thought that that's the kind of writer I would be, but I was very pleasantly surprised to find out that I'm actually a bit of a plotter. I like to plot the storyline, whether if it's a fiction book, and if it's a non-fiction book, I like to plot the topics and the chapters and the sub-chapters before I get started. Now, a lot of people are obsessed with finding the title of the book before they get started. That is the least of your worries, and I don't think you should worry about it before writing the book, because whether it is A Little Wiser, A Little Happier, whether it is Unlock the Real You, whether it is Unraveling Anjali, Diary of an Immigrant Bride, the titles were the very last thing that I came up with. For those of you who remember, I started writing Anjali, the Diary of an Immigrant Bride, actually as a blog way back in 2011. And for those of you who've been with me on this journey right since then, you would remember that back then it was just called Anjali's Diary. Do you remember that? I know a lot of you have sort of connected with me much later, but I'm sure there are many of you out there who've been with me from 2011 when Diary of an Immigrant Bride was merely a daily blog that I used to write. And back then it was simply called Anjali's Diary, which was a placeholder title that I had kept there just to give it some kind of title. So whether it was any of my books, the title emerges only once you finish writing the book, because by then the book has a vibe of its own. You know what you're talking about, you know who you're addressing, and eventually the title comes to you. So don't obsess with the title just yet. If you're starting out your book, leave it for later. Maybe have a working title. That's the term, working title, which is basically a title for a work in progress. It's not your final title. All right, so plotters and pantsers. Personally, if you were to ask me, I believe that plotting a non-fiction book is a smart idea, because it gives you enough of momentum to keep writing. So plotting versus being a pantser. Okay, so let's talk about structuring a non-fiction book. For those of you who are aspiring memoir writers, anyone out here who is listening who wants to write their own life story, who wants to write an autobiography or memoir, anyone out there who wishes to do that? So let's say you want to write your life story. The first and important thing when it comes to structuring a memoir is to remember that just because an incident happened in your life doesn't mean you have to write about it. Because the most common trap for memoir writers, unless of course you've been through something larger than life and you've overcome an obstacle that most people don't have to commonly experience or go through, then it makes sense to write about a lot of the experiences that are linked to that particular life lesson. It's important to write. But for the large part, if you're writing a memoir of a life that has been extraordinary in spurts, but not necessarily extraordinary in every single incident that has come your way, then it's important to know which part of your life to focus on primarily when you're writing a memoir. Of course, you can touch upon some of the lesser experiences, you can touch upon some of the less important relationships, but just because you're writing an autobiography, it doesn't mean that you have to write in a linear fashion, right from I was born on a Saturday in 19 whatever. You don't need to start from that point. If you're writing your autobiography and there's a particular core message that you want to send out to your readers, start by asking yourself, is there a theme? Is there an underlying thread to this nonfiction piece that I'm writing? Is there a universal message or a life lesson that I want my readers to go away with when they close the last page of my book? Once you've narrowed down to the particular life lesson or the particular theme that you want your memoir to rotate around, then make a list of all the experiences, interactions, conversations, and relationships that are linked to that particular life lesson or that are linked to that particular theme, and then design and craft your nonfiction book around those. There is no need to describe a quarrel you had with your younger sister when you were 7 years old if it has no impact or bearings on the theme that you have based your book on. If you've had an argument with your in-laws, but your book has got nothing to do with dealing with in-laws, then writing a long and tedious chapter about an argument you had with them makes very little sense, and it will put your readers to sleep. So remember that in our lives, everything that happens to us is of utmost primary importance. But just because it is important to us, just because it is interesting to us, does not mean it will be equally interesting or equally important to your readers who don't know anything about you. So if you're an aspiring memoir writer, then please start by asking yourself, what is the core theme? What is the core message that I'm trying to convey? And then talk about experiences and relationships that link to that. Now we come to what I talked about, having a book as a business card. So this is one of the most popular genres of nonfiction at the moment. So let's say you have your own business, or let's say you are you consider yourself a bit of a subject matter expert, and you're hoping to write a nonfiction book that establishes you as a thought leader in your niche, or it establishes you as a thought leader in your industry. You want to be seen as a bit of a forerunner, a bit of a trendsetter. It's a great idea to write a niche book, a business book, or a nonfiction book that establishes that authority. Okay, so now I'm going to teach you how to actually structure this kind of book that establishes you as a thought leader. Have you all heard of the word mind mapping? Mind mapping. And where's everyone? They're not even answering my questions today. What is it? Is everyone feeling sleepy and tired? Or is everyone feeling unmotivated? It has to be one of the two, right? Or if there's option 3, let me know. So, do you know what is mind mapping? What is mind mapping? So typically it is, a visual tool that you can use to get more clarity on your thoughts. It's pretty much a planning or a plotting tool. It's called a mind map. Personally, I have used a mind map whenever I've written my books, and I think it is very, very helpful. So I'm just going to show you how to do that, and excuse the mirror image. So what you do is you take a blank page and you are beginning your mind map for this thought leadership book, or this subject matter book, or this book that talks about your business and establishes you as a forerunner in your industry. So at the center of the mind map, draw a circle and write in 1 or 2 words, 3 words max, what your book is about. So let's say you are a sales guru. Okay, let's say you've worked in sales for many, many years and you're considered a bit of a whiz when it comes to sales. And you want to write a book that will help other salespeople or help other aspiring salespeople to learn from everything you've learned in your journey as a sales guru. Well, you were not a sales guru once upon a time. It was your experiences that have helped you become that today. And now you want to share your knowledge of sales, and you're writing a book that will help aspiring salespeople to learn the art of selling. So at the center of your blank page, you draw a circle and you write the word sales. Now excuse the mirror image, you're probably seeing it upside down or wrong way around. So you write sales in the center. Then you draw arms that come out from this center circle. So you draw something like this. Now each of these arms is going to stand for a subtopic. It's going to stand for a chapter in your book. So this is where you're brainstorming and you're going to think of different chapters that could be part of your book. Okay, so let's say one thing as a salesperson that you've always had to deal with is angry customers. I mean, who has ever tried to sell something and not come across a grumpy customer? I have worked in sales for many, many, many years, and I'm very familiar with angry customers. And they seem to crop up out of nowhere when you're least expecting them. So as a sales guru or as a subject matter expert in the field of sales, you have had your fair share of angry, grumpy customers. So one of your chapters will be angry customers or dealing with angry customers. So you would write that. Now when you're mind mapping, there is no need to write long, fancy sentences. Just write quick bullet points that will tell you what it's all about. So you write angry customers as one of the arms that goes out from the central circle, which has got sales written in it. Another thing that as a salesperson you may have come across is the importance of closing a sale. All well and good for you to have great conversations and a great relationship with your potential customers, but unless you close a sale, you don't have a paying customer. So let's say another chapter will be closing a sale. So I'm just writing this down, and instead of showing it to you every step, I'm going to show it to you at the end. Maybe the third thing is, there are a lot of competitors in your particular field selling the same product you're doing, selling the same service you're doing. But over the years, you've learned how to stand out from the competition. So maybe one chapter could be stand out in a crowd. Okay. Another aspect of your sales journey has been when your bosses have told you, hey, pick up the phone and this is a database and these are people who have never dealt with our company, and so you just have to call them and sell our product. That is called cold calling. And maybe in your journey in sales, cold calling has been a massive part of your work, and you have perfected it and you have mastered the art of cold calling. So let's say another one of your subtopics is making cold calls. And let's say every salesperson worth his or her salt has at some point in their sales journey had a day when they made 0 sales. Ooh, I remember the pain and the sting of that. Coming home feeling dejected because no one bought what you were trying to sell. So I always say salespeople have some amazing highs and some amazing lows, because on the day you make lots of sales, you're on top of the world and you think you can conquer it all and the world is your oyster. On the days when you make no sales, you are down in the dumps. Now, as a bit of a sales whiz, as someone who's been in sales for many, many years, you have learned the hard way how to deal with life when you have zero sales. You know how to bounce back. So you've mastered the mindset that you need to adopt on a day when you make zero sales. So let's say one of your chapters is called When No One Buys What You're Selling, or when you make no sales. Okay, whatever sounds more glamorous. So this is how my mind map will now look. At the center is my core topic that my book is based around, and all these tentacles around it, all these arms are the chapters that I want in my book. So once I've done those main arms that go out from the central circle, each arm can have mini arms, which will be the subtopics inside your chapter. So for example, in the angry customers chapter, you could have some sort of subheadings where you talk about different aspects of this particular topic. So those will be inside a chapter, mini chapters inside the chapter, that kind of thing. So subtopics. And that's how you create a table of contents. So let's say you are plotting and planning your nonfiction book. Mind mapping it will help you put together a table of contents. Now for this little one here, For a Little Wiser, a Little Happier, if you can see, and those of you who have the book at home, and thank you for everyone who's written to me and told me how much they enjoyed my books. I really appreciate that. If you can see, there is the contents, and then you have a few pages of, this is the table of contents, 3 pages. So these are all my topics, and I believe I have 45, if my memory serves me right, something along those lines, mini chapters. Of course, these are mini chapters. You don't have to have those many in your book. You know, even a book with 10 chapters is plenty. So I actually wrote this table of contents even before I started writing each chapter, because by putting together, you know, by mind mapping and getting my list of chapter titles, I had some clarity in my mind, and I was then able to flesh out each chapter. Okay, so that is how you structure a non-fiction book. I have used the example of, let's say, a sales guru writing a subject matter expert book on the art of making sales or the art of selling. And I have used mind mapping to explain how you can structure your niche book or your expert book. Now, whatever it is that you are writing about, it is a good idea to use sort of this framework to structure it out. It's a one-size-fits-all kind of framework, no matter what genre you're writing in. This should give you a bit of a starting point. So we've almost reached the end of our workshop, and I have covered the main parts that I wanted to cover. Does anyone have any questions for me? Arvind says, hi Nim, how are you? I'm well, Arvind. How are you? If you've missed most of this workshop, it will be available as a recording on my Facebook author page. So hopefully those of you who come in late will be still able to enjoy all the points that I have discussed so far. So if no one has any questions, I'm going to wrap up here. I hope you've all enjoyed. A few things that I wanted to point out. If you are planning on writing a book, or you're planning to write your life story, or you're planning to write a book that establishes you as an authority or as a thought leader in your industry, I just wanted to let you know that we've recently launched the publishing arm of my company, which is, you all know Nim's Niche is my company. We've launched recently Nim's Niche Media, which is an emerging media company, and we have a publishing arm. So we offer packages from start to finish if you're looking at getting your first book published, or second or third for that matter. So whether it be cover design, whether it be editing, whether it be marketing, whatever it is, we offer packages that help you kickstart your journey as a published author. So if you want some more information about that, please write to info@nimgholkar.com, and either my business partner, myself, or someone from my team will write back to you and kickstart the process. The second and equally important thing I wanted to remind you all is that my creative writing program for kids, the next lot of dates is up on my website. In fact, I've had a lot of response for that, and a lot of you have already registered. So I have two age groups. There is the 5 to 8 age group, and then there is, for the 5 to 8-year-olds, I still have some spots left in the Tuesday program. And then there is the 9+. So I'm going to put the link for those programs in my comment section below. The program is made up of 3 sessions, and it is priced, the entire program of 3 sessions is priced at $99, which is a hugely discounted price that I am offering. Having said that, if you have a New South Wales creative voucher, which is $100, you can use that and get my program for free. If you don't have the voucher, it's just it's just $99 for those 3 sessions. All those details can be found on my website. If you do miss these dates, I don't want you to panic, because this is an ongoing thing I'm going to be doing. So there will be programs every month. So if you miss this month, you will be able to sign up your child next month. So that's it from me today. Ram Kumar says, hi Ram, how are you? Thank you for joining in. And hopefully you've all enjoyed today's mini workshop on how to write nonfiction. I wish you all a lot of luck in your writing process, and I'm sure we'll stay in touch. Until then, take care. Bye for now.